Okay, I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about how to plan out your garden because there are, when we start out, we have just an empty space, and I think, well, I want some lettuce, I want some tomatoes, I want some leeks, I want a whole wide range of things. And so there's a process by which we need to actually sort out how to best use our space. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about a space. I'm going to set up a space on this board, and we're going to assume that you would be working in a space that is 4 feet wide, and I really don't care how long it is because you can do any variation that you want to for length as many times as you want. So let's just say this is the edge of your garden bed, and this is the other edge of your garden bed. And I think we're going to try to use a better marker. Let's try this one. There we go. So the space across here is, we're going to call that 4 feet. Now, before we figure out how we want to lay this out, I need to talk to you about what the actual dimensional pieces are and the terminology that we use. So the first one you need to understand is, what is plant spacing? Plant spacing is the distance between a plants in a row. So that's this distance from here to here. For some things like carrots, that might be 1 to 1.5 inches. For tomatoes, that might be 2 feet. Lettuce is 1 foot. All right? That is called plant spacing. That's how far it is between each plant in the row. Doesn't matter whether it's from transplant or whether it's from seed. The other significant space that we need to understand is something called row spacing. Row spacing is the distance between rows of plants. So I'm not going to mess up this part right now, but let's just say that I had a row of tomatoes and I had another row of tomatoes, because those are on 2 foot centers. So this would be 1 foot, 2 foot, 1 foot to the edge of the bed. The distance between these rows of tomatoes is called row spacing. Okay? The other really important spacing that you have to consider when you're planting is the depth. So if this line represents the top of the soil, and I'm planting something like a carrot seed, well, I need to plant that somewhere between 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep, like that. But if it was going to be corn would need to be about 1 inch deep. This distance is your seed depth or your plant depth, okay? So this is depth. If you get any of these spacings wrong, you may get a crop, but you will not likely get a healthy crop, and you won't likely be able to maximize the space in your garden. Because let's face it, you want to be able to grow as much as you possibly can in the garden. Now I want to talk to you just for about one other really important planting tool or dimension that we use when we plan out a bed. And this is not something you're going to find in a lot of places or many people are going to teach you about. But that's something called a fourth dimension that very few growers talk about, and that's days to maturity. Days to maturity are referred to in a couple of different ways. There are days to maturity from direct seed. That's when I put seed in the ground like this. And there are also days to maturity from transplant, which is what would be true for a cabbage or a lettuce, for tomatoes, for eggplant. And that's when we're planting a baby transplant. The days to maturity are either from what we call direct seed or from transplant. And that information is readily available in the catalog. So, let me give you an example of how to maximize this space that probably is something you haven't ever seen before. Let's say, for example, that I want to grow tomatoes. I love tomatoes. Tomatoes, already said, are on 2-foot centers. Now, I like to stagger them, so I'm going to do this. Right? Again, this is 1 foot row spacing, 2 foot, 1 foot, because they're grown on 2-foot centers this way, and also on 2-foot centers from here to here. So a row like this, tomatoes planted like this, actually represents 100% of a tomato crop if I was a commercial grower. The days to maturity for that crop from transplant is 72 days. Let's suppose that I want to grow some lettuce. Well, if I was going to grow lettuce in a 4-foot wide bed, I would be able to grow 4 rows of lettuce across here because they're on 1-foot spacing. So I would come in 6 inches and then I'd have lettuce, 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 right? I could get 4 rows of lettuce across there. Well, lettuce is a 50-day crop from transplant. So I have some space in here. I have 2 feet here and I only need 1 foot for lettuce, so I can actually grow lettuce on 1-foot centers between my tomatoes. And by the time that I harvest my lettuce, it won't be in competition with my tomatoes anymore. So they're sized for the space that they need for the days to maturity. So this would actually represent 25% of a lettuce crop. Well, let's see. Is there anything else I want to grow that doesn't take very long? I'm going to say that I like radishes and spinach. Both of those are 28 to 30-day crops, and they don't take a lot of space. So I can come out here and I can plant radishes from seed, or I could plant spinach from seed. And that represents about 40% of a radish or a spinach crop. But they only take 30 days to harvest. This is a spinach or radish. By mixing my crop this way, I'm actually creating a healthier environment for my plants because I am creating microbial diversity. When I go in to harvest my radishes at 28 days, I pull the root and the leaf, right? But I don't get all the roots. And those roots that are left behind are carbon and water, and as they dissipate, they're airspace. So I've made my soil healthier for my eventual tomato crop. I've done the same thing with my spinach. I've cut the spinach off the top and I've left the roots. So now I have carbon, water, and airspace. Well, a few days later, about 3 weeks later, my lettuce is ready to harvest. So I cut off my lettuce and I leave behind the roots and again, carbon, water, airspace for my tomatoes. When I plant like this, I have effectively planted 165% of a crop. If I have a 50% crop failure, I make 82.5%. But as a commercial grower, I get to play again, which is really a great thing. But I've also increased the efficiency of my space. When you get ready to plan your garden at home, You're going to plan around season and timing and all these other things. But I want to challenge you to understand your row spacing and your plant spacing in the context of your days to maturity, so that you can then, and there's all kinds of combinations of this that work. And they work very nicely with good crop rotations. So this is how I would recommend you approach planting your garden. Have fun with it. Sometimes you're going to get, I can grow lettuce much later into the season because it gets some shade in the afternoon from the tomatoes, so it doesn't bolt as soon. There are all kinds of combinations, onions, peas, all different kinds of combinations doing this that will increase the efficiency and the yield of your garden because it wants to grow more things. Nobody is fertilizing the rainforest. And yet it sustains more life of every kind, insect, mammals, fish, birds, all of it, plants, than anywhere else on the planet. And no one's fertilizing. It's because it has created this amazing efficiency of the soil. And we can do something similar to that to increase the productivity of our garden. Have fun with it.